So first things first, we have got Ben and Cameron from Team Tradr to present their project to us, and let's give them a really, really warm welcome, please. Thank you. Thank you. Oh.
Well, first of all, thank you for coming down to listen to us. We are Team Tradr. This is Cameron, Ben. I'm also Ben, and we're going to tell you a little bit about our final project. So, for our final project, we decided to create a web app. So the idea is to connect potential customers with local tradespeople. And we had, a good example of when you might want to use the app is if, for example, you wanted to do some home improvement, for something as small as getting your bathroom refitted to something a little larger in scale, like a housing extension or a loft conversion, something like that. And our app the aim is to connect the people who need those services with the people who can make that happen and get the job done. So we had three main goals. The first was to help local businesses, so to help people who are self-employed, small businesses. So it helps them advertise their services and get their name out there. Also to help individuals find the services that they need as well. So for both of these parties, it creates a kind of trust network where a user can rely on a kind of community of recommendations instead of just going off word of mouth and recommendations from friends, and tradespeople as well can know that their name's getting out there and that they can build a reputation through reviews. And our last aim as well was to aid communication between these two parties and ensure that they can communicate effectively through all stages of the project through to its completion. I'm going to pass you over to Cameron, who's going to give you a little demonstration of our app.
Hi. So we've prepared this short little video, which is just a short demonstration of a run-through of the app. So we'll be running through pretending to be both a user and a trader. We initially decided to split accounts in two, so we have user accounts and trader accounts. So when you initially sign up as a user, you'll give your first name and last name, so we've gone for the creative choice of example user for our user here. You'll also give a password and a date of birth, which has to be over 18. So when you go to your user page, you'll have all the projects you've worked on, and you can also customize your page to have an avatar and information and such. But for now, we're going to sign out of that account and make a new trader account instead. So when you go to make a trader, you have to provide a little more information with things like your location, which is used to get the distance between yourself and the project. So once we've signed in as this trader, again, we've gone for the creative example trader. It's easy for me to remember. So once we've signed in, we can see the projects that this person has worked on, and again, their personal information. So we'll sign out and we'll sign into an account that we made earlier, which has a few projects already on it. So for this project, we can see a live Google Maps view of where the project actually stands. We also have a chat window for everyone involved in the project. And then if we go to a trader on the project, we can see a project they've worked on and their reviews and how their score is based off their reviews. And if we wanted to add the trader that we made earlier to the project, then we just press this Add Trader button, where we can see a live Google Maps feed of where these traders are, given the location they provided. And we can filter that down to plumbers, so we can see the trader that we made earlier there. So then we can follow either the card or the pin to their page and send a request for them to work on our project. So now we're going to go and accept that request by signing in as that trader we had before. And now we can see that we currently have one open request. And these requests have the start date, the end date, and the location on them. And when it's accepted, they're automatically enrolled on that project. And then they can send a message or however they want to communicate with the other people on the project. So this is shared between the user, the owner of the project, and the other traders to try and facilitate that communication between all parties. So now we've sent that, we can sign back out and go back onto that account that owned the project. And for the actual logon as well, we are using JWT authentication, so they have to actually put a password in, which was awful while we were actually developing it. So now we're actually on the page, we can then see that message that's been sent by the other trader and when they sent it, and then we can send our reply. So now we'll decide that we're actually finished with this project and we can set its status to complete. And when that happens, then it'll move to that complete section on their dashboard. But also when we visit that trader, it now appears on their past project, so they can build up a sort of portfolio of projects they've worked on. We can then go ahead and leave a review, so just a simple header and how quick they were to work on the project, given they got it done in less than a minute. And then we can leave a score between 1 and 5, and that's automatically put in their review box and their scores updated based on their averages.
There we go. Right, so a typical user story. Obviously, a user can make an account, as you've just seen. When they do that, this is a user from, say, a customer's perspective. Information such as date of birth, and it is validated, so you can't have a 12-year-old sign up and say, I need a house extension. Once they have signed in, they can customize their account, obviously with things like an avatar and whatever else information they might like to enter. They can post a project, so a house extension, for instance, and as you saw, it will allow them to search for traders in the local area, and it defaults to a 20-kilometer radius. So this is why we're trying to really pitch it at local traders. So it will default to a fairly tight-knit group. Once they've found some traders that they're happy to work with, they can send a request to them, and then once they've added them, they can start to message anyone else on the project. And then if we flip to the trader side, so again, they make an account, they have to enter a little more information because they have to enter their location. Because if a user says, I want to launch a project in Liverpool, they will obviously need to default to within 20 kilometers of that. They have other information they have to enter, such as a day rate. You need to know how much you're going to get charged. And like I said, their location will decide which searches they appear in. So they can, once they're in, they can manage their requests. They can either accept or decline. And once they accept, again, they're added into the project page where they can communicate with the customer or the vendor of the job, as well as talking to the other traders on the job. So they can say, we're going to have this issue to overcome, and they can sort it out between them. So then on to the Spaghetti Junction tech stack. So for the front end, we went with React. We did have a look at React Native, but we felt that the best tools for the job came from React.js. We just found it just did what we needed it to do. We used styled components alongside that. Styled components were great because they meant that we could just write something once and use it again and again and again. Also it allowed us to use JavaScript logic because we actually have different themes, different color themes, depending on whether or not you're a user or a trader. Moving on, we also use Firebase for hosting things like avatars and images of the projects, which was a little bit of a horror show, but we're past it now. This allowed us to allow the user to upload an image, and it would just host it on Firebase and then send a link into their database, and the front end would reference that, and it all happened instantly, eventually. After Firebase, for our back end, we went with Express. We did discuss the possibility of using some other things. C# was thrown out there. But again, much like with React, we just found that Express did what we needed it to do, and it met all the needs quite nicely. That was tested using Mocha and Chai. I think we had in the region of 50 or 60 tests. And they all pass. So yeah, we used that for testing. It was very test-driven development, which was really good. Ironed out a lot of kinks. On the back end, we had Postgres as our database because there was a lot of relational data. As I'm sure you can imagine, you had a lot of traders who might have multiple projects, messages overlapping everywhere. So yeah, we went for Postgres on that. And to keep the syntax nice and tidy, we were using Connects because it's just great. So I'll hand you over to Cameron now for a bit more tech speak.
Yeah, so I touched on it a bit during the presentation, but for authenticating users, we use JSON Web Tokens. So for that, when a new user or trader is posted, then their password is first salted and hashed before it's actually stored in the database. And then every time they want to make a query to the API through the front end, then they have to send an authorization token on their headers. So we also used the two Google APIs. So we use the Geocoders API in order to have it so when a user signs up, they give an address, because we didn't want people to go and get their latitude and longitude coordinates. So when they get their address, that's sent in a request, and we get the lat and long coordinates back, and they're what's stored in the database. And then we use those to calculate the distances between the project and the trader. So then you saw also in the video that we had Google Maps as well. So we used that to display the sort of map of where the project is, where the traders are, and just give a bit more of a visual representation of how far away everything is. And it also let us place those pins that you might have seen. And that let us display things like the trader's username or their score or their price per day and things like that. So it was just a way of giving more visual representation of where things were so we could really drive the distance aspect of the traders so people looked for more local traders. So I think Ben's going to talk about how we actually worked through the project.
Our approach was inspired by a lot of the key tenets, well, some of the key tenets of agile software development, one of those being simplicity. So this informed our tech choices, using things like React.js and style components. We were able to write components we could then reuse, making our code a lot more dry and sort of minimizing the amount of writing and work that we'd have to do in order to essentially get the job done. And on top of this, communicating and working very closely as a team. So we had regular discussions about where we were at in the form of daily stand-ups. This was really good because we could review and evaluate as we went along and identified new problems every day and how best to tackle them head on. But this also required regular discussions throughout the day as well, as we were working a lot of the time individually on separate Git branches. We also used the Kanban board. This was a really good way for us to both visualize our progress, but also it kept us motivated as well, because we knew what needed to be done. We felt good about things that we'd achieved. But we did run into a couple of problems throughout the project. One of those problems was the fact that we were a group of 3 and quite a small group. We found that we had to set achievable goals, being quite a small group. But on top of that, we found that having been used to working using pair programming, we had to adapt and learn to work a little bit more independently. But this also meant that we had to be quite flexible sometimes. If we encountered a task that was particularly challenging, we'd pool our resources and team up and pair program for when it needed to happen. Cool, I'm going to hand you over to Cameron to talk about some of the things that we might incorporate into the app if we were to continue with it in the future.
Yeah, so one of the main limitations was that we only had 9 days to work on it, and there was only 3 of us. So when we entered the initial planning phase, we kind of split the project into an MVP that we wanted to develop and then a sort of list of stretch goals that we wanted after that. And we think that we actually reached the MVP pretty comfortably, but we unfortunately didn't manage to get all of our stretch goals in. So some of those were to enhance some of the trader features. So one of the features that we talked about was having a sort of trader network. So on a trader's profile, they could display a list of traders that they've worked with before. So say, for example, you're an electrician and you worked with a particular plumber that you worked well with, then you could say, oh, I've worked with this person before, so I'd recommend putting them on this project or something like that. We also threw around the idea of possibly allowing people to have multiple trades, so someone could be an electrician and a plumber. However, then we'd have to sort of overhaul our entire backend and add things like reviews for separate trades. So like, you could be an excellent electrician and a mediocre plumber, and you'd have to have 2 different review scores for that. We also talked about payments. So we actually did mess around with payments a little bit, and we were using the Stripe API for that. And we did get it working. However, we didn't end up finding the time within the project to implement it with our structure. But yeah, given a few more days or weeks, that would have been something that we'd have added just so we could keep the entire process of the project system internal to the website without having to go to external places for it. We also spiked notifications towards the start of the project as well. However, we found that with the amount of effort and time that we were putting into it, we felt that was better placed on other parts of the project instead. So they were kind of placed as a lower priority. But also, if we were given more time, we'd have really liked to have done some user need finding studies. So all 3 of us aren't really traders. So we'd have liked to be able to go out in the street and interview like plumbers and electricians and other occupations and ask what problems they face and what they would have liked to see in an app like this before we started implementation. So really we were going off sort of experience we've had with traders instead. But yeah, overall, I think we did hit our MVP, and we are happy with the project that we've developed overall. And I think it does have quite a bit of potential to be scoped out further with lots of new features. But yeah, I think we're very pleased. Thank you for listening.